Recording is on.
Okay. All right. Recording is on. So thanks everybody for joining. We are trying out something new today. We are on Jitsi, which is it's kind of an up and coming video conferencing tool. And so far, so good, I think. Hopefully this recording comes out. And if it doesn't, well, then we'll try something else. Today, just got a few things on the agenda, but always want to start off with sort of the why we're here and what we're doing, and some things I've been thinking about in terms of collective organization and the wider world. So we're here to support each other, and what that means specifically means kind of two things, sort of financially, in the sense of we're here to work together to produce some sort of good that's useful to the rest of the world that we can get compensated for. And then second, to help each other do the best work that we can to survive crises like that we're experiencing now, and even just down to the level of personal relationships. That's the reason why the Dalten Collective exists. And practically how we're doing that right now is we're collectively owning and managing the star Dalten. That's our primary responsibility at this point. But I hope to see this group expand into other areas of work, and hopefully very soon, and organize in a way that's not really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of organization. It's really very likely that some existing governance mechanism and structure should be just fine for this group. But we are unique. We are unique in that we are distributed across the globe. We primarily use the internet and Urbit for our means of communication and coordination. And we're not limited by geographic boundaries. So as I've been thinking about some of those things this last week and sort of the larger picture of what we're seeing in the world today, it's clear to me that the expansion of what some just call globalism, more and more interconnectivity across the world in supply chains and finance and the internet and a many number of things, is being put under severe strain by this COVID-19 sort of crisis. And the reason for that is fairly clear. The more connected anything is, the more susceptible it is to things like a pandemic, because that's the way a virus spreads, is through connection. Okay, so globalism is more susceptible to large-scale pandemics or anything that's going to spread through a network. And same thing you could think of on the internet, the same idea that a virus can spread very quickly. We're very used to that sort of thing. Botnets, where hundreds and millions of computers are sort of enslaved to do somebody else's bidding, is very commonplace. Okay, and now we're seeing sort of the downsides of that, and it's becoming clear that the structure that has been built over the last, say, 70 years post World War II is showing some strain. It's showing some wobbliness, and we've probably been in a transition period for some time. I think that's not anything new to anybody here, but the way that's likely going to shape out is, there's really kind of two possibilities, maybe three. There's two likely possibilities for what might happen in terms of consequences from this event. One, we could see a doubling down on things like globalization and or centralization, in which case you might see more and more sort of dictatorial type governments and some of these other things where more power is consolidated. I think this is particularly likely in finance, sort of like with the term that I've recently discovered called the euro dollar, which is just basically dollars that are held in foreign bank accounts, which makes possible global trade. So that could even centralize even more after this. Or in the other same too, you're starting to see things on the like the Western states of the United States have come together to coordinate how they're going to sort of reopen when the pandemic has sort of run its course, or at least the first wave. And you're seeing the same thing in New England and some of these other states where they're working together outside of a federal framework to get what they need to get done. And this would be sort of implying a decentralization or a moving away from centralized control and power more towards local. And maybe a third way would be something sort of in the middle between these two things. But I think that's probably unlikely. So we have these two kind of these sort of forces, and they're probably going to both emerge at the same time. They're both going to have hot spots, so to speak, in terms of how things are shaping up. And at some point or another, like, it's going to be clear that either the swing of things is going to be more towards decentralization or centralization. And then we'll probably see either a new paradigm shift to a new sort of framework, or basically that. Yeah, we'll see some new framework emerge from that. Okay, so what does that have to do with this group? Well, I think in that way, it's interesting that we're seeing things become more and more sort of local, and in a lot of ways, I think that's good, and a fair response to the world that we have today. But that seems ironic, or at least counterintuitive, to the advantage that Dalten Collective has, which is that it's, for the most part, non-jurisdictional. It's borderless. It doesn't have a particular location. So we're seeing things happen at the same time, or I should say, it seems like what I'm seeing is, in some structures, we're seeing more localism, physical structures, potentially, or more likely, like supply chains and domestic production and even governance or government. And on the other side, where we have sort of these other kinds of networks, like the internet, we're seeing things like Urbit emerge, which is sort of like this weird local thing on the internet, but it's not local in the same sense. And a great example of that is Dalten, right? This is you could think of Dalten as a very local, a very community-oriented thing that lives on Urbit, because the way Urbit is constructed, it gives us the most freedom and the most, it gives us the most autonomy over our own destiny. That's why we use it. And on the other side too, we've got people from all over the world. And I see this sort of playing out more and more, where it's not just a and or kind of situation. It's sort of a mixing of things. And Dalten is particularly well positioned to be something like whatever the local movement is on the internet, which I think is very clear what that means, sort of in a geographic location, like farmers markets and things like that's a come to the land type of movement. But that same thing is happening online right now. But that doesn't mean it's geographic. It's actually not geographic at all. It's sort of more maybe it's maybe more something similar to the way values, potentially the way people want to organize, and that's the way that's our local community and our local way of being. And I just found that particularly interesting as I've been seeing this highlighted in sort of the feeds that I watch and some of the comments that I've seen recently. And that's kind of what I wanted to share with everybody today. And so moving on to just into the agenda. Okay, so the multisig. So RapSif, I don't know about you.
It wasn't me.
Well, it's been pretty painful, right?
Yeah.
It's just not working as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
This was the reason I suggested we use Gnosis Safe over the other Gnosis, because there's a predecessor to this, was because Gnosis Safe had been it had more security work done on it. Mm-hmm. But the prior version has had stored a lot of value, like hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of its existence. It at least as of yet has not been hacked. I found it to be more stable myself. Now, there are other multi-sig options. There's things like the DS Safe, which is a DAPSIS thing, but that one is like command line only, so it's a little. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but it's also like it's kind of power user level of Ethereum-based management. So, in that sense, I might suggest we experiment with the original Gnosis multisig.
On that note, there
I just got a Discord message from the Gnosis group that said that they're releasing, and I haven't been able to do any research on it, but Gnosis Protocol. And so there may be some additional layer of Gnosis that we should take a look at. That may have been where some of their development activities were diverted from Gnosis Safe, which appears to have some issues. So I don't know. I'll take a look at that and see if I can understand what's going on there. But I just wanted to bring that up while we were talking about it.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly open to other. Actually, I think what we need to do now is kind of look at it again and say, is this the right tool? Because I found it to be extremely buggy and just not very pleasant to work with. And I mean, the last thing I pushed through, that should have worked, and I can't come up with any reason why it didn't work. In fact, like the last transaction that went through, the final, there's like 3 transactions that kind of tail end on each other. One was the final confirmation, which went through fine. Then there was the actual execution of the thing to be executed, which said it had errors but still worked. And then the actual call to the coin or the token that we were using as an experiment failed. So there was like, okay, it just got worse. Like, okay, why didn't this work? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's continue working on that. And then again, though, once we're in a place where we're comfortable, we can move assets around, then we can actually drop Dalten itself into that multisig. Hey,
What's
Mark.
that command line one called? Sorry.
DS Safe. And that one is put out by it was put out by DAP Hub years ago.
Cool.
All right. And Mark, just to let you know, we're just finishing up with an agenda, and then since you're here, I'll pass it off to you at the end of the sort of housekeeping items. That's cool.
Cool.
All right. Then the next one was the hackathon that we wanted to kind of to work on. I since Sarpin is not here, it might be difficult to talk about this a bit more. But Rapsif, have you heard from him at all on this? Is that something he's still wanting to work on, or is it just sort of would be nice if it works?
I have not. He seemed interested, but I don't think he ever got through to the other group or chat rather that you set up. I can ping him and ask him.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let's go ahead and ping him and ask him.
Okay.
And while you're pinging him too, just also let him know that we're gonna work on some other multi-sig options.
Will do.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is the Friday podcast that I'll be doing with Eric Newton. So what that is about, so Eric, his background is, so he was a divorce lawyer, he ran a podcast, and now he's currently the chief operating officer for Talon.